They can crush your heart at night and pour themselves a cup of tea the next morning as if you don't even exist, leaving you to wonder how someone could hurt you so deeply and act like nothing happened. Stay with me, because once you grasp the thinking behind this behavior, you'll never doubt their forgetfulness again. You'll see it as a plan. If this already rings true for you, pause for a second and tap the like button. Not for me, but so this message reaches someone who still believes they're overreacting. When a narcissist hurts you and then immediately rewrites the story as if nothing occurred, it's not an accident, a quirky trait, or emotional immaturity. It's a psychological defense system they've built over time to protect their fragile inner world. Narcissists have a very low tolerance for shame, guilt, or personal responsibility. The moment they feel even a hint of being in the wrong, their mind goes into self-protection mode. Instead of dealing with what they did, they clear the slate, not for you, but for themselves. They change reality in a way that keeps them blameless and leaves you questioning what you saw. This rewriting serves a deeper purpose. Being held accountable feels like total destruction to them. Most people can admit, yes, I messed up, and then fix the situation. But for a narcissist, admitting harm threatens the false image they depend on. So, rather than facing that internal collapse, they take a quick mental shortcut, they deny it, downplay it, or pretend it never happened. Their goal isn't to mend the relationship, it's to maintain the illusion of being superior and in control emotionally. If they acknowledge the hurt, they would have to sit with feelings they've spent their whole life avoiding. They also rely heavily on emotional forgetting. If they can convince themselves the event wasn't serious, they expect you to follow their lead. It becomes an unspoken command. Don't make this real. And when you remain confused, quiet, or unsure, it assures them that their changed story is working. The less you push back, the more they reinforce the idea that you're dramatic, sensitive, or remembering things incorrectly. Their need to change the story isn't about the event, it's about keeping themselves comfortable emotionally. If the truth makes them feel exposed, they will bury it instantly. If your pain threatens their sense of control, they will make it seem unimportant. This is why their memory is selective, their timelines shift, and their responses seem disconnected from the harm they caused. You're dealing with someone who protects their ego first, reality second, and your feelings last. A narcissist's lack of emotional empathy is a main reason they can hurt you deeply and then go through life as if your pain doesn't exist. Emotional empathy is the ability to feel the impact of our actions on another person, to recognize their hurt as important, and to change our behavior because we care. But a narcissist doesn't process emotions that way. They might understand intellectually that you're upset, but they don't feel it. Your pain doesn't echo inside them. It doesn't cause discomfort. It doesn't activate guilt. It doesn't inspire them to make things right. To them, your emotional reaction is more like noise than a message, something happening outside of them, rather than a reflection of your connection. Because they don't feel the emotional weight of their actions, they don't see harm the same way you do. Where you feel heartbreak, they feel inconvenience. Where you seek a clear ending, they seek to avoid the conversation. Where you look for accountability, they look for escape. Their emotional landscape is flat when it comes to your hurt. There is no deep feeling inside that says, I should fix this. Without that inner moral nudge, they don't feel pushed to revisit the damage. This is why they can go from causing chaos to acting completely unaffected. They were never emotionally connected to the moment in the first place. This kind of emotional disconnect also allows them to excuse almost anything. They don't feel your fear, confusion, or disappointment, so it's easy for them to label it as exaggeration or overreaction. Since your emotional world doesn't register inside them, they assume it shouldn't matter outside either. This is why they make light of, dismiss, or ignore what you're going through. They don't put themselves in your shoes. They only consider how the situation affects their comfort, image, or control. It's a self-centered view that blocks out your humanity, and because your emotional reality doesn't impact their inner world, they don't see harm as something to fix. They see it as something to move on from as quickly as possible, often expecting you to follow their lead and let it go just as easily as they do. When a narcissist hurts you and then acts like everything is normal, it's not because they've moved on. It's because they want you to move on without asking for accountability. Acting normal is their way of regaining control after an emotional disturbance. Conflict shows their flaws, and nothing threatens a narcissist more than being seen without their perfect mask. So instead of addressing what happened, they immediately go back to business as usual, hoping you'll follow their emotional script and pretend the pain never existed. This behavior is calculated on a psychological level. By acting as if everything is fine, they are sending you a message: don't bring it up. Don't challenge me. Don't expect me to fix it. It's a silent dismissal of your emotions and a quiet display of power. When they pretend nothing happened, it puts you in a confusing spot. You either match their tone and swallow your hurt, or you become the problem for bringing it up. This dynamic pushes you into accepting their version of reality, where the harm never happened and your feelings don't matter. For the narcissist, pretending everything is normal isn't emotional maturity, it's emotional manipulation. They know that if they get involved in the conflict, they risk losing control, admitting fault, or giving you power. So they choose the path that keeps them safe. Their calmness is not peace, it's avoidance. Their indifference is not forgiveness, it's dismissal. This strategic reset allows them to shift the emotional burden onto you while they continue acting untouchable. They expect you to go along with this reset because it helps them in two ways. First, it wipes away their wrongdoing without any accountability. Second, it trains you to question your own reactions. Over time, this becomes a cycle where your pain is minimized, your voice is silenced, and their control becomes stronger. Acting normal after hurting you is not a sign of emotional stability. It's a tactic designed to keep the power in their hands and keep you emotionally off balance. Narcissists fear consequences far more than they feel guilt. This is one of the biggest reasons they can hurt you and then behave like the situation is already over. Guilt requires emotional depth, the ability to reflect, and the willingness to sit with uncomfortable truths. But narcissists operate from a place of fragile ego and constant self-protection. They are not guided by an inner moral compass, but by an internal alarm system that activates only when their image, control, or comfort is threatened. Your pain doesn't shake them, your potential reaction does. When they sense that their behavior might lead to consequences, whether that means losing access to you, being confronted, being exposed, or facing criticism, their priority becomes fixing the situation as quickly as possible. They don't want to repair the damage, they want to avoid the bad outcomes. This is why they can suddenly become calm, casual, even pleasant after causing harm. They shift into a self-preserving act designed to make you doubt whether bringing up the issue is worth it. If they act like nothing happened, they hope you'll follow the script and let it slide. Their fear of consequences shows up in subtle ways. They may downplay the event, change the timeline, blame stress, or accuse you of being too emotional. These tactics aren't random. They're safeguards meant to block anything that threatens their carefully created image. They panic at the idea of responsibility because responsibility requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like danger to them. So rather than facing the truth, they try to outrun it by pretending the problem doesn't exist. The more you hesitate, the more they relax, because avoidance is their victory. They believe that as long as there are no visible consequences, there is no real issue. This is also why they often become defensive, dismissive, or cold. when you try to revisit the situation. They're not reacting to your feelings, they're reacting to the threat of being held accountable for their actions. Their entire emotional system is wired to protect themselves first and protect their image second, leaving your experience as an afterthought if it registers at all. When a narcissist pretends nothing happened after hurting you, it's not emotional forgetfulness. It's a tactic to reset the power dynamic in their favor. They aren't trying to resolve the conflict or create peace. They are trying to restore control. In their world, accountability equals vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like weakness. So instead of acknowledging the damage, they rewrite the emotional atmosphere by behaving as if everything is fine. This creates psychological pressure on you to match their tone, to quiet your feelings, and to give up the need for clarity. It becomes an unspoken demand that your emotional reality should bend to theirs. This reset is intentional because it twists the balance between you. When someone hurts you, the healthy and natural next step would be discussion, repair, or apology. But a narcissist avoids all of that by skipping to the end, the part where everything is back under their control. By acting normal, they remove the space where you could express your pain or ask for accountability. They rush past the moment where you hold power and try to force you into emotional agreement. It's less about moving forward and more about erasing any moment where they were not in charge. This tactic also allows them to maintain psychological dominance. If they can make you question whether the incident was serious enough to bring up, they win. If they can make you hesitant, guilty, or afraid to disrupt the normal atmosphere, they reinforce their authority. Every time you walk on eggshells, they gain proof that their reset strategy works. Their calmness becomes a form of control, not a sign of emotional maturity. Over time, this dynamic trains you to silence your feelings to keep the peace while they continue taking advantage of the silence they created. Their goal isn't harmony, it's dominance. Pretending nothing happened is simply the fastest and cleanest way for them to reestablish the hierarchy where your feelings are beneath theirs and your voice doesn't change the reality they want to live in. To a narcissist, your reaction is far more important than the damage they caused because your emotional response is the part they can use, measure, and control. The hurt they inflicted doesn't truly matter to them. What matters is how you respond to it. They watch closely whether you cry, confront, shut down, question yourself, or chase them for reassurance. Your reaction becomes data. It tells them how much power they still have, how much access to your emotions they can maintain, and how easily they can steer the situation in their favor. When you react strongly, they don't see it as evidence of your pain. They see it as confirmation that they still influence you. Your emotions become proof that the bond is intact on their terms. If you break down, they interpret it as emotional dependence. If you argue, they interpret it as an opportunity to shift blame or increase control. If you go quiet, they interpret it as compliance or fear. In their mind, your inner world exists mainly as a mirror reflecting their importance. They also use your reactions as a shield from accountability. If you become upset, they immediately focus on the tone, the drama, or your overreaction, shifting the spotlight away from what they did and onto how you responded. This creates confusion, and confusion helps them. It keeps you emotionally unstable, unsure of what the real issue is, and more likely to give up your need for clarity just to avoid more conflict. Your reaction becomes the new problem, a distraction that protects them from facing the original harm. This dynamic is exhausting because it puts you in a cycle where the more you try to express your hurt, the more they twist your emotions into evidence against you. It prevents solutions and keeps you emotionally on edge. Over time, you start suppressing your reactions just to avoid being misunderstood or attacked, which makes them feel even more in control. And that's ultimately what they're looking for, not understanding, not repair, but the reassurance that your emotional world is still something they can shape, influence, or silence whenever it suits them. Narcissists' emotional capacity is very limited, and this is one of the biggest reasons they react to conflict like it's an attack rather than a chance to fix things. Where healthy people see disagreements as part of human connection, a narcissist sees them as threats to their carefully protected self-image. They do not have the emotional ability to handle discomfort, self-reflection, or the vulnerability needed to say, "I understand how you feel." Their inner world is too fragile, too rigid, and too chaotic for that kind of emotional work. So when a situation becomes tense or painful, they don't lean in. They shut down, retreat, or pretend everything is fine to avoid dealing with feelings that overwhelm them. Because of this emotional limitation, conflict feels dangerous to them. It disrupts their sense of control. It shows their flaws. It demands a level of emotional honesty they simply cannot provide. Instead of processing the moment, they quickly try to skip past it. They may walk away, distract themselves, become strangely calm, or jump into humor or routine as if the moment never happened. This behavior is not maturity, it's emotional avoidance. Their nervous system can't handle the pressure of accountability. So they take the shortcut, erase, ignore, and reset. This limited emotional capacity also means they don't understand how their behavior affects the relationship. They cannot track how their words land or how deeply their actions hurt. Even when you try to explain it, they listen only through the filter of, "How does this affect me?" If your feelings require empathy, patience, or repair, they reach their emotional limit quickly. So they automatically use the reactions they know, dismissing you, minimizing the situation, flipping the blame, or acting like nothing ever happened. Their limited capacity doesn't make them innocent, it makes them incapable of healthy connection. And because they cannot handle emotional depth, they force you to shrink your needs, silence your hurt, and lower your expectations just to keep the peace. Over time, their emotional limitations become your emotional burden. A narcissist's ability to intentionally target your emotional weak spots is one of the most painful and confusing parts of dealing with them. When they hurt you on purpose, it's not random, it's planned. They study you quietly, patiently, and with precision. They pay attention to what makes you react, what makes you soften, what makes you chase, and what makes you crumble. Your vulnerabilities become a psychological map they use to maintain control whenever they feel insecure, threatened, or exposed. And once they see the places where you're most sensitive, those places become their main tools. This is why their cruelty feels so personal. It is personal. They don't attack you randomly. They attack you exactly where it will hurt the deepest. If you fear abandonment, they withdraw. If you value honesty, they lie. If you crave reassurance, they become cold. If you open up about past wounds, they use those wounds to their advantage. To them, your pain isn't something to protect, it's something to use. It gives them an upper hand, a psychological advantage they can use to guide the relationship back into an area where they feel powerful. Their intention isn't always conscious in a logical sense, but it is highly instinctive. When they feel the slightest threat to their ego, they strike where you are softest because it guarantees a reaction. Your emotional response assures them that they still matter, that they still have influence, and that you're still emotionally involved. They interpret your hurt as proof of their importance. They see your tears, confusion, or desperation, not as signs that they've gone too far, but as confirmation that they still hold the reins. Over time, this dynamic trains you to hide your vulnerabilities to stay safe. You learn not to share too much, not to speak too honestly, not to reveal the tender parts of yourself, because every time you do, it becomes ammunition. This is the tragedy of dealing with a narcissist, a place where you should feel safest they make the most dangerous.